like when he swings it around, it almost goes out. Like you can barely see the flame at all. See, this is interesting because this is reacting very differently to that Kevlar one where when you swing it, it left a trail of fire.
Shadowversity.
Greetings, I'm Shad.
And greetings, I'm Tyranth.
And Tyranth, today we are going to be looking at a video from Mike Shake.
Yeah, very popular content creator.
And I like him. I've seen a couple of his videos. I think I've seen his whip one.
Yep.
Where he makes the whip. And I think he also did a video on nunchucks, which also attracted me as well. And so in this one, he has made something that we have a little bit of experience in ourselves.
Yes. I like his content. He has very high production. I like the way he presents it as well. Usually it's more, how would I say, generalized than anything really specific. And today we're looking at flame swords.
That kind of works in his favor. He presents it as his more of a normie experimenting things, trying to make stuff. And that does make it accessible to a lot of casual viewers. Our own content is very more niche specific. It's for the sword enthusiasts and stuff. But we did do a fire sword video, and we had an interesting time getting it to work. I want to see how he built his, which is what I'm particularly interested. I also see effectiveness and stuff because we tested our fire sword against actual flesh, against targets, and we had some important, I guess, takeaways, results from those tests as to, is it really worth it?
Yeah.
You know? Would you want to, even if you could make it with magic, right?
Yeah.
Is it even a viable option? You can still check out our original video. It's there. We'll link it towards the end. But let's check out how Mike does with his one.
Creation of one of the most unique swords ever existed on this planet.
Okay, see, even right out of the gate, it's confirming some of our conclusions already.
Yeah.
And if you watch carefully, what is the thing that did the damage in that hit?
It's the sword.
It was the sword. The fire did nothing. In fact, the fire almost went out completely. Like if we skip back just a tad,
one of the most unique swords ever existed.
Like that, it's like it's not the fire isn't even on the sword anymore because of the swing.
On this planet,
and it relights when it slows down a bit.
Mike is actually a great guy. I mean, he is. When I did my video on him, he responded and he was very open about, he is normie, which is not a bad thing at all. And I respect that because he's just having fun with it and he's learning these things. And he's also exposing it to a huge amount of people. Flame swords are interesting because they don't really add too much. Like the flame doesn't add too much. The sword does all of the heavy lifting. You also have then the issues of like lighting it and not lighting it and then ruining the temper. Like there's so
many
much
issues. Yeah. But you can see the angle is very, especially when you get to here. I would
also say that sword has a very thick bevel to it. That is crazy.
Is that single-edged or double-edged?
It looks double, but it looks almost like a...
Are you getting thrown off by the...
maybe because it's
because of the...
edge angle?
Yeah, I think his... edge angle is real, especially, and it gets really bad.
Oh, okay.
So
all right. Yeah. So it looks all right then.
Ooh, interesting. Like we already have a decent chunk to say just right from the beginning.
Well, I also wanted to comment on because he's cutting ballistic gel there as well. Now we haven't used ballistic gel just because it's expensive, hard to get. But from what I understand, as a sword medium, it's not the best.
It looked pretty easy to get through.
Well, it was also very stretchy. So I think maybe it's a little bit of his edge angle, but also just the medium he's using.
Because one of the interesting bits of feedback we were able to get was we're cutting into actual pork and the skin of the pork, and to gauge, all right, is it burning the skin? How much damage is it doing between the fire and the sword?
But the main takeaway is the sword cleaves it in half.
Yes, right. I was like, and then the fire actually ended up maybe cauterizing the wound a bit, which would make less damage. But there was an interesting advantage that we did find out of the fire sword. We won't give it away. Watch our video if you want to see what one of the cool advantages you can get out of this. All right, this one seems a bit more valid.
Roster from bread. More specifically, Dutch bread. So CAC decides to open up their own metal 3D printing department called K3D, all to make their own tools for the bread production.
Then they can print metal. This stuff is cool. I love the 3D printing metal.
And so they buy two metal 3D printers called Metal Fab 1. But things didn't really go according to the plan. If the laser moves too fast, or it's set to a low intensity, it doesn't really melt the powder completely. So instead of getting a perfectly solid 3D printed part, you get a very porous one, like with millions of pores. But now, if you got a porous knife and you blow air through it, suddenly bread doesn't stick to it anymore. Actually, almost nothing sticks to it anymore. It basically works like air hockey.
Have you seen this video?
I've seen some of it, and
because I was wondering how I was going to make it. If this is the take, this is actually kind of cool.
yes, but all of the results we got are still the same.
Yeah.
That's essentially what I'm getting to. It's like, it's really cool that how he's gone about doing it. And I know that he's collaborated with another YouTuber I also watch, is really cool. But at the end of the video, all of the results are still identical.
But what's I'm going to preempt here just by his preamble is that he's made a porous blade that has heaps of holes in it that he can then feed fuel through and light up. That's awesome. That's a cool kind of design.
Air gets pushed through the pores, and it creates a thin membrane that prevents even the stickiest stuff to stick. Now, the reason I know about all this stuff is because I watched a video of a Portuguese YouTuber called Intexa. The first thing he thought about doing with the knife was setting it on fire.
I think I've seen that.
This is what happens if you blow a flammable gas like
I can't remember
butane
the
into
channel
knife.
name. I think it's like
And if instead
Inezca
you
or
use
something.
hydrogen. That knife is the second mistake of the story. And when I saw that video, I just thought about one thing.
I'm always brought back to the it's interesting because what I'm thinking about is one of the biggest detriments of a fire sword, a flame sword, whatever you want to call it, is you ruin the temper.
Yes.
With something like this, you are going to, if it had a temper, first off, I don't think these have a temper to begin with, you are going to obliterate it in like a second.
And also, because it's made out of a porous metal,
It's from within.
the blade is not going to be strong enough to hold up to any level of abuse. It would shatter and break
At least
if you hit
with
something solid.
At least with when you take a regular sword that already has a good temper on it, and then you turn that into a fire sword, it doesn't get hot enough that it's going to ruin the blade instantly. So you can get some good use out of it, but over time it'll obviously degrade. So you kind of get the benefits of a fire sword
for a little bit.
For a little bit.
The sword we sacrificed on our fire sword, the temper ended up being destroyed completely, and when it's like that, you can just bend it.
But
and
it was
it's
a bad sword.
It was a bad sword to begin with,
and like the temper on the sword to begin with, I was not convinced. It was just thick.
This is true.
It's just interesting because I bring it up because this one where they're feeding the fuel through the blade.
Yeah.
And you can see the blade getting like red hot.
And I think like it works in the sense that they're able to make a fire sword that looks just like, because one of the issues with fire swords is the material or fuel that you need to wrap it around with. Just drenching the sword in fuel doesn't work. And so the ways people do it, literally wrapping it in a Kevlar cloth, right? Which is, you don't really get a sword out of it because you can't chop things really well with it. And what we did, we attached a wick to the blade, which worked pretty good. It means the edge was still available to cut and it could still function like a sword. The way that they're doing it, you just see the blade on fire and it looks wicked. And so in that sense, it looks more legitimate, but it's also not going to function like a real sword. You hit anything solid with it, it'll probably break.
That was the benefit is because we had an external fuel source and wick attached to the blade. It means it still had all the characteristics of a fire sword. It still got hot enough where the blade is doing, like the heat is providing some small benefit, but at the same time, it's not enough to instantly destroy the blade. With this, I don't think you're getting all of those tiny little benefits, but more negatives.
Well, like I said, that porous steel, I am concerned that it could even survive a solid hit against anything that, it's not going to get through. I think
because like we fought with ours and they were fine.
Yeah, we've got footage of the fighting with those swords. Did you know we are making exclusive full-length episodes just for our supporters? This week's release is us reacting to more of those McDojo sword delusions. It actually gets even more crazy, if you can believe it. YouTube is in such a state at the moment that the only way we can continue making this content, even the free content, is purely thanks to our supporters. You guys are literally the ones that are comprising most of our revenue supporting the business and us able to make this content. So if you want to help support us continue to make this content, the stuff that is available for free, and get access to the exclusive great content. This is like full-length videos for as little as $1 a month. You can get access to that content and also help support the channel. It means the world. Remember, this week's video is a fun reaction to the sword illusion stuff. It's great. It's either released or going to be released this week, as little as $1 a month on Subscribestar, Patreon, or channel memberships, and then you get all that backlog content as well, like great episodes. So do support if you're able to, and let's get back to the video.
That is the third mistake of the story. Now, we gotta find a way to make the sword though. At first, I thought you could just take the knife and simply scale it up, but the porous metal is probably not as tough as the normal steel you would use in a knife or in a sword. And so, scaling the knife up would just mean having something that's way too fragile. So the sword has to be thicker than the knife. The problem is that increasing the thickness also generates another issue. If we could split the knife here and look in this direction, the section will look like this. It's hollow. And that's because the porous metal has a maximum thickness.
Interesting, because I thought it was porous all the way through, but no, it actually has a hollow core.
Which makes it worse.
Yeah. Weak.
After which the gas would not be able to flow through it. So since we need to make the sword thicker than the knife, and it also has to be hollow inside so that the gas can flow through it, we would have a lot of empty space with thin walls. And as you can imagine, like that.
I haven't seen this full video yet, right? And I'm wondering how they would resolve this. And I'm thinking, what, maybe they honeycomb the inside?
Let's watch and find out.
But it's an interesting engineering challenge.
It is. But keep in mind, the end. I'm trying not to be like mean about this. I'm not trying to be mean. It's just then you also, even at the end of this, it's still not going to be. You attach to like a gas thing, and you know it's still not like a functional sword in that sense.
Yeah, as cool as the effect is at the end of this,
I love it.
It looks great. It doesn't achieve the result of having a proper functional blade that's on fire. Yeah. What do you reckon would be the best method? Then, because we have kind of three primary methods we've been considering. We've got the wick that we'd added, which I'm going to say is probably the most functional method that I can think of, because when you wrap it in the Kevlar, you're literally wrapping, material over the blade, preventing it from being able to be used.
Yeah.
And then you have this method, which just, it's not going to be a solid enough sword. He does cut through stuff, so I guess we get to see how solid it is. I just think it's not going to be solid as a real sword that needs to clash against other swords and armor and survive significant abuse.
Yeah. The one that I'm going with is I've got the holes in the blade, so you can feed the wick through, because the issue we had with the sharp sword we made was I used a heat-resistant silicon to hold the wick on, which was great because we got a big, thick wick, but it means over a little bit of time that degraded and basically came off. Yeah. So I think actually having the holes through the blade to hold the wick and then using something like the Kevlar, which will last a lot longer, is a far more effective way to put the fuel on the blade.
You know what I think would even work better? It would be a lot more work, right? Instead of a wick, a type of metal or steel hose that has tiny holes along the end that we could continually feed fuel through.
Yeah, the problem is that it's not going to have an edge.
If we put it on like the same way that the wick does, like weave it through holes, so that you weave the hose through the holes of the sword.
Oh, right. Okay, I know what you're saying, but yeah, okay. Yeah, but I'm not a fan of having like an external fuel source. I'm much more of like...
Because of danger.
Yeah, well, it's just danger and practicality. Don't get me wrong, it's cool to have a fire sword that'll last forever, but it's like if I have to carry a gas tank on my back, I'll just carry a flamethrower. So what I mean is like, because having fuel that runs out is more reasonable.
It is an issue though, because you only have a short amount of time.
It is, but like I much prefer that than to have to carry around a fuel source.
Yeah, I get that, because I probably wouldn't want to have that fuel source on me either.
So we need something to fill this space.
Okay, so yeah,
makes the sword strong, but it also allows the gas to easily flow through it. And right now, I have no idea how to do that.
I think we can solve this problem with a gyroid.
What is a gyroid?
So is that guy French?
There's this trick that
French?
instead of like 3 between
I don't know.
solid,
He's walking around with a glass of wine.
Use some geometry to make it strong but not that heavy. This was a scientist in
that's what I
I
was picturing honeycombing, but it's kind of the same thing.
It's called the gyroid. And it's basically a minimal surface area geometry, which basically means that you don't really have a lot of material, you have a lot of the strength, and the best part of it is that it allows the gas to flow through.
Or blaming if something goes very wrong with it.
Okay, I was already skeptical of how strong it is, but maybe it's stronger than I'm predicting. You don't think so?
It's still
it's still because it's made out of porous steel is also the issue.
It's porous steel and it's also unheat treated steel, and it's probably not like the grade of steel is probably like a.
Well, the grade of steel in this level of manufacturing can actually sometimes be really high. They're called powdered steels.
Yes,
and those powdered steels can be tough as hell.
Yes, but they're not. They don't go under the same stresses and loads that swords do. There's a reason why we make swords out of what we make them out of.
Because they make knives out of powdered steel, and the performance of the powdered steel knives can be crazy good, but they don't go under the stresses that swords go under. Interesting. Yeah, and so they probably would still snap.
Yeah, like I think.
But that means they could hold an edge, though.
Aluminum can hold an edge. Like any metallic objects can hold edges.
Powdered steels are really tough steels, and they hold an edge really good.
Yes, what I'm saying is cutting soft, medium targets, it'll be perfectly fine. But clashing against another blade, first off, what would happen if you cut the blade in half?
I don't know.
Does it turn into a flamethrower?
Oh yeah, like if it snapped and then your fuel is there.
Yeah.
Anyways, after Intexa finished the 3D model, we sent everything to K3D, where they 3D printed the sword. And here it is. This looks very unique. There are two types of metal in here. In the handle, there is a non-porous one, because you don't want it to spit fire, while the rest of the sword is porous metal. Total length is about an arm long. Thickness is a little bit more than 70 millimeters.
I'm curious what that little bit in the middle is, like a weld? Or...
Yeah, I don't know, like a connecting point or something.
Very thick for a sword, but that's because the gyroid had to fit
inside
the
thick boy.
Oof. So it was thick in the start.
Blade. There is also a welding mark here, and that's because the metal 3D printers have limited dimensions for the parts they can print. And so I told the other guys I was gonna make the handle of the sword before the test. Now, I have no idea how to make the handle of a sword, but I'm motivated. So I got a chunk of aluminum. Steel is usually better for a guard, but aluminum is great at dissipating heat, which...
Yeah, I think aluminum is a good pick for the guard. Easy to work with.
It's definitely the priority for this
I'm still on that welding bit right in the middle.
Yeah?
Yeah, because I'm just thinking like, if they just did a straight weld, is that mechanically strong enough? Like, because if you can 3D print it, why wouldn't you 3D print it with like a dovetail or some mechanical thing you could slip them together and then weld? Sorry, I'm just thinking about other things.
Chunk with the approximate dimensions of the guard. And right now, I got something like this. Before shipping it with the grinder though, I gotta do the hardest part, which is drilling a hole in here so that I can fit it
That's alright if you do.
The hole
look,
to have
hold on.
the same exact...
I've got an example. This here is an aluminum guard that we made for the, not for this one exactly, but for one of the carbon fiber swords. And this is like a chunky crossguard.
But it's surprisingly light still because it's aluminum. So you're right. Chunky would be fine.
But usually, you got to remember, it's proportional to the blade. That was a big blade.
Yeah, but the thing is though, because it's aluminum so light, you could get away with a chunky one like this even on a longsword.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's not the case. The extra weight of the pommel would bring the center of the
I'm just glad he got a good reference point to figure that out.
I'm more surprised he didn't make a katana. He makes a lot of katana stuff.
He does.
Process I used for
and he's going more European with it. It's just interesting.
And then I smoothen the edges.
So he's making it out of aluminium by the look of it, because if he wanted a better counterbalance, brass.
I have no idea how much that sword weighs to begin with, so maybe that'll work.
After spending a while sanding the pommel by hand, I polished the guard and the pommel with a buffing machine. I think they look pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, the only thing missing before the test is the grip. My idea to do that is to make a wooden core around the handle and then add soft and grippy materials.
See, the tang is already pretty wide on it.
As a reminder,
I think
this
you'd want
part
scales
is
and
not
then wrap it.
porous,
Yeah.
so the gas would just
What's funny
flow
is
through it
those examples
a core around the handle.
Are far better. Like as a pommel for this particular sword, that is a much better pommel to make because then you can just put the connection straight through. Making a wheel pommel for this particular sword is like a bad idea.
Yep, good point.
And then add soft and grippy materials on top of it. As a reminder, this part is not porous, so the gas would just flow through it without getting hot. Hopefully. Starting with a wooden core.
It's hard to gauge because like the handle looks too big for the size of the sword, but the sword is small, and so maybe it's still got the right circumference, that it's a comfortable grip. It looks chunky though.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm okay with it on this sword because you do want to keep that heat away from your hand, so
yeah.
drilled a hole into the pommel. This way, I can temporarily place it at the end of the handle.
Oh.
The balance of the sword got...
Okay.
I don't like that.
No.
This way, I can...
We were not expecting that.
Yeah.
That's a disc pommel on the base.
Yeah.
And look, they exist in historical swords.
I don't like them.
Tolwas have those types, but yeah,
I'm not a fan.
good for European swords at all. Then that is an odd pick.
Yeah. Because now the grip is even shorter.
Yeah.
temporarily place it at the end of the handle. The balance of the
Because he even
sword
showed that it was going to lie flat on his when he was putting it together.
got much better than before. And this would probably already work as a grip.
Interesting look. Let's
It looks like a game sword.
Yeah, it actually looks like
a
one of
low
those.
poly game sword.
Interesting.
But to consider it complete, I need twine, glue, and patience. First, I'm wrapping the handle with twine, gluing it every once in a while to keep it in place. The handle like this feels much more comfortable already. But to make it even better, I took a piece of leather and I cut a few strips out of it. This final wrap keeps everything in place.
You have something to say?
I'm just thinking, because this is like, I've made my own sword handles. This is how you would do it in terms of the processes. Obviously, it's not as refined. It's a very thick handle. I'm just trying to think if I would do that for a sword, like for a fire sword handle specifically, because on the examples we had, one of them had just a carved wood handle with I don't even know if it was leather. It was like a plastic or something kind of spiraled around it, and that ended up burning off in the end. And then on the other example, we had, what are they called? Like leather rings, very thick leather rings, which worked really well because it kept that heat away. I don't know if I'd go this route because the heat goes into the handle.
Yeah. What would you do? Like, I reckon one of the things is, light the wick further away from the hilt.
Yeah.
That'll certainly help. But what would be the best handle material, you reckon?
I'm not sure. It's still one of those things I'm working on.
Actually, aluminium.
No. That's worse.
You reckon?
Yeah, aluminum is very good as a heat conductor, so it'll transfer it straight into your hands. It's just interesting for this sort of method because leather like that last layer of leather, is very supple and soft and...
So what about several thick layers of leather? You reckon that would help?
Well, that's what we did. We had the big thick leather rings. They're basically just thick leather rings, and it worked out reasonable. Okay. So maybe that's probably how I'd go about it, personally.
Multiple layers of leather.
Yeah.
Base and makes the grip even more durable. To
Like,
finish
ironically,
it up, I added 2 leather strips.
I think a katana is a better option for this sort of project.
Interesting. How easy does silk burn?
I don't think it matters because you've got very thick wood, then you've got the ray skin, and then you have the wrap on the very last outside. So like
those are multiple layers. That would
Yeah.
actually be a decent handle to prevent heat transfer.
it's also single edged, so it's easier to work with. Like, and you also have more spine, so you could probably put the wick at the spine. Like, a katana might be a good way to go about a fire sword.
Yeah, might need to get a ROM one.
Yeah.
I can hold the pommel in between the gas connector and the grip. At this point, there was a little gap between the pommel and the grip,
A scent stopper pommel on this would just be perfect.
but I tried to fill that with O-rings, and it actually worked pretty well. The pommel squeezes the O-rings against the grip, and everything feels very tight and sturdy. And now I just gotta sharpen the blade. As an
leather
experiment,
seams in the
I'm
wrong
trying
spot.
to polish
Yeah, and he still hasn't even tested it yet. Like if the porous will
slash
transfer
sharpen the porous metal, using the porous knife as a guinea pig. And this way, it certainly gets sharper, but polishing it also closes the pores.
Yeah.
And since we want to have as much gas and as much flames as possible, I'm just gonna sharpen the blade with whetstones. Hopefully this edge will be enough to cut stuff. So here we are. The setup is actually pretty simple. You just connect the sword to a butane tank through a hose, and by opening the tank, butane gas would flow into the sword.
Okay. I don't know. For me, I would be wanting to wear more protective gear than that. I'd be worried.
At minimum, gloves.
Yeah.
Gloves are good.
Are you sure? Yeah.
Backyard engineering there. Just look at the flaring around. Like, I'd be like,
And I think it kinda works.
that looks wicked.
And the look is not even the only cool part.
Yeah, like when he swings it around, it almost goes out. Like you can barely see the flame at all. See, this is interesting because this is reacting very differently to that Kevlar one, where when you swing it, it left a trail of fire. Where with this one,
it's not even the only cool part.
He swings it. If we go slowly, like look at that, it's basically
out. Yeah,
out. Like there's no flame there at all. And then it just relights when, because there's still obviously heat enough for it to relight when it slows down. You can see a tiny glow at the tip, right? But that is performing very differently to other ones that we've seen. I mean, it's still cool, don't get me wrong. And it's, when it's still, like, look at that, that looks wicked. But it's actually nowhere near as visually stunning when you swing the thing.
No, like...
I think because like I said, we had two. I think the one that was sharp, I think that one was far more visceral because we had big, thick wicks on it that absorbed so much fuel. When you swung them, they still stayed.
They stayed alight. Yeah. And the other thing is that because they're using gas, that's the other issue. Like if you're using a more liquid fuel, when you swing it, the moisture and fuel kind of gets flung out. That's what happens with the Kevlar fire sword, and that's what creates the trail of fire. So it's the also fuel source that's affecting the look. They probably I would say the pores are too small to get water or a liquid through, a liquid fire through. You could only do this with gas, I'm assuming. It looks
so we
wicked.
kept staring at it in
like
disbelief for a while, and slowly the sword became cursed. I mean, it turned black, which I believe it looks actually better than before. To be fair, I'm pretty happy about the handle though. Like, it's holding up very well. Aluminum doesn't even get that hot.
Actually, I think you got just the best combination possible because you have wood here, which is insulating so you don't burn your hands, and the aluminium is perfect to dissipate heat.
Does it dissipate heat well or conduct heat well?
What I'm thinking is happening here is because they're constantly feeding the gas through the handle, and it's not ignited near the handle. That cools it. The handle, where later on in the blade it ignites. I'm assuming.
They did that on purpose. The plan is to test the sword against a lot of targets, but we spent the entire morning just looking at it. What I also find very fascinating...
And you've also got to remember, because it's so porous and it's not solid, the actual blade itself won't conduct as heat as well as a solid blade.
Yep.
Distortion that the heat leaves behind. It looks so surreal. You can even see the heat in the shadow of the sword.
Man, that would annoy me so much having the cord coming over there. Oh, that would...
It kind of reminds me of the proto sabers in Star Wars.
And when the wind hits the blade, it almost looks electric.
That's cool.
All right,
that looks wicked.
Let's test it. First of all, what happens to the targets when you hit them with a flaming sword? And second thing...
See, my prediction is that not much different, except it's going to be a hotter blade because the flame almost dissipates when you swing this. So.
We want to actually test how tough the porous metal is because right now we don't know. It could be fragile. It could be
I'm interested
tougher
in this
than the normal one. We have no idea. And also, we want to find out how sharp it actually is.
I mean, the ballistic head is probably the hardest target there.
Yeah, exactly. Everything else is really soft.
Yeah.
Like pool noodle, tatami mat. Like pool noodle would be weird because it would melt really quickly. I think a tatami mat would
be interesting. Yeah,
the better material to test on this one. Yeah. And look, we love pool noodles. We say they're really good analogs, but for a fire sword, particularly, especially one that has a profile like this, you want something that has that little bit more resistance to it.
Well, this one also doesn't have... I'm more interested in its structural rigidity than how well it cuts.
Exactly.
Because it has a bad edge geometry.
Like, how do you reckon it would go up in our wood test?
That's what I mean. That's why I want to hit something. So I think the ballistic head is probably the strongest thing here.
Are all the targets we're going to test?
Because, these will not give good feedback for the strength of the blade.
Also, Watermelon got into a little bit of an accident on the way here. Anyways, we're going to try to slice all of them, starting from the easiest and ending up with the toughest one.
I'm pretty sure it's completely going to destroy the tomatoes. I'm not so sure about the gelatin guy.
I'm not sure about the gelatin guy. I fear about the sword, honestly. Now, the sword is pretty thick, and because of that, we weren't sure if he was going to be able to cut anything at all.
I don't like it.
But it actually worked.
Such a soft.
That was that sword did not look like it liked going through that watermelon.
No, it didn't.
That's how I'll describe that.
Then, by watching back the super slow motion footage though, we realized that the flame actually disappeared before the impact with a watermelon.
And so it's just basically a sword there.
That also cracked it as well.
Yeah.
That didn't
It's
actually,
so thick.
it
We
wasn't
want big
sliced.
flames. Always.
How are we gonna fix that?
I have no idea. Oh god, it's going now. Oh jeez, it's going now.
Yeah.
Not
That's
sure if you
gotten
can see
pretty
that on
big
camera.
now. Look at the flame on
That
that.
thing is insane.
That's
It
a
felt
bit
like holding a
crazy.
furnace in my hand. But this trick
I
apparently
wonder how
solved the
hot
issue.
your hands would be getting at this point. Oh, it's a bit better.
Yes. Okay, we found the
But
way.
he didn't swing it very far.
Yeah.
It's hot, but I guess we found the
See, look, yeah, it's conning again. Oh, that is an ugly cut on water bottle.
And even though flames still went
And
away
look,
for a fraction of a
it's,
second, the
It's
sword
ugly
actually
because
got the
of the blade profiles, I was saying.
Yes, but this is one of those ones where the water negates any of the benefits of the fire sword.
water plug, and the flames skinned back almost immediately after the hit. So then we quickly went through 3 different targets.
There's like no flame there.
But if you look at those, the actual cuts, they're all very... Well, I'm not talking about their cuts, I'm talking about because of the edge geometry of the blade, how thick it is,
yeah.
it means every cut is kind of like a wedge.
Yeah, they're very. I would call these ugly cuts.
Yeah.
Like, cause, and it's again blade geometry. The blade is
Now
so thick.
we're gonna move to the
And I'm
fun
not even
stuff.
sure how sharp it
You know,
is.
ballistic gelatin is actually pretty tough. It should simulate muscle tissue. And as an example, my supersonic chain whip did basically nothing to it. So we were kind of worried the sword
Sword's
was
a
gonna
bit
bounce
different
back.
with ballistic gel.
But it actually went through it like butter.
Like that was clean through. No resistance whatsoever.
Yeah, like
I didn't get
that's
the
a
slow
tell me
motion
how
shot,
to
so
do it.
I'm gonna try to hear it again.
I don't think it would
And
get
this
to the
time,
time, man.
Yeah, I don't think.
We
I think it's
definitely
too
got
thick.
it.
I mean, this still looks cool,
Yeah.
and interestingly enough, because the ballistic gel is so, I guess, compliantly flexing out of the way, it has
A
like,
cleaner
basically,
cut.
It shows a cleaner cut than
Yeah.
what would really happen with a solid.
But then when you look
target.
at something like the fruit, which will crack rather
Yeah.
than you see the fruit kind of split apart.
Exactly, like there was cracking and ugliness with it, but the ballistic gel literally flexed around the blade
Yeah.
to let it cut instead of wedge and crack apart. And so it
First,
looks much
I went
better
for the head. Nice.
as a
I'm
result.
scared, honestly. I feel like this could actually break the sword. So it's either gonna break the neck, or the sword is gonna break.
Yeah,
But
this isn't
obviously, there is only
the
one way to
hardest
find out.
target
Yeah.
either.
The neck is the easy part.
That bends.
I feel like it did.
I think he cut it, and then it fell, and it separated the head from the body. So then, to understand what exactly happened, we watched the slow motion footage.
Man, what I'd give for a slow-mo camera like this.
Oh yeah, no. Oof, that is an ugly cut. Then the fire comes back because it gets stuck in the thing.
Yeah.
So
See, that's like an axe. That was like an axe cut.
worse though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it took a little bit of time to break the neck, but then it sliced through, and I guess it separated when it fell on the floor. Look, yeah, it's broken.
No, I can't believe we actually did this. Like, seriously. Like, it's insane. This shouldn't be real. And I'm still not 100% sure it actually is.
All right, so really interesting video. Lots of kind of cool observations there. Lots of other things like, you know, I don't think it would just hold up against like smacking it into wood.
No, I don't think so.
And I understand why they wouldn't want to do it. They spend a lot of money in making that thing.
I still just prefer more like the regular type of fire sword, ones we've scored and made. I just think they have more, they're a better weapon.
Yes, as a weapon that can survive impact and actually cut into targets well and stuff like that.
That's what I want from my weapon. So yeah.
And of course, if you want to see our fire sword video where we put one of our own kind of I guess, concepts of the test. And they're, like I said, they're really interesting conclusions as to, because one of the things we're testing in the video is how viable it is as a functional weapon. If you could just light it up with magic.
Does it enhance a sword in any way?
And so that video is right there. Check it out. Hope you enjoy it.